When Karen Mitchell walked into Judge Judy's courtroom, it wasn't her lawsuit that turned heads, it was her outfit. A gold-trimmed designer blazer shimmered beneath the lights. Diamonds glinted at her wrist and a $3,000 handbag dangled from her arm, as if the entire courtroom existed to admire her. Every step echoed with arrogance, every smirk whispered one truth. She believed this was her stage. But Judge Judy had already noticed something small, something sharp, something Karen never expected anyone to see. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Karen was suing her neighbor for property damage, claiming the woman had ruined her luxury bag by spilling coffee on it. The words "limited edition" rolled off her tongue like royalty, her voice dripping with the confidence of someone who thought money could buy truth. Her neighbor, dressed modestly in a plain navy blouse, stood silent, clutching a folder of receipts. You could feel the imbalance and status against sincerity, pride against patience. From the very first moment, Judy's eyes flickered between the two women. She didn't interrupt, not yet. She just watched. She watched how Karen spoke with her hands, always flashing that diamond bracelet, and how she leaned toward the camera when she said, "This bag is worth more than her entire paycheck." The audience murmured, some rolling their eyes, others laughing quietly. Judy didn't laugh. She simply tilted her head, her pen tapping the desk once. Then came the first reveal. As Karen placed the so-called designer purse on the bench, Judy's gaze sharpened. Her years on the bench had taught her more about truth than any brand could ever hide. Something in that stitching, the sheen of the leather, the placement of the label, it didn't add up. Judy said nothing, but her expression shifted just slightly. She had seen something that told her this case wasn't about spilled coffee. It was about something else entirely, something much bigger and much uglier. But Karen didn't notice. She was too busy performing. Too blinded by her own reflection to realize the stage she'd stepped on was built for judgment, not applause. Judy leaned back in her chair, still silent, letting Karen's pride fill the air like perfume. Heavy, fake, impossible to ignore. And in that silence, everyone watching felt it. This wasn't going to be an ordinary case. Because in this courtroom, image can't outshine truth. And Judge Judy had already seen through the shine. Before you decide who's right, remember, things aren't always what they look like. What do you think Judy noticed first? Comment below where you're watching from, and stay till the end because when she exposes it, the entire courtroom freezes. Judge Judy's courtroom was a living theater of arrogance that morning. Karen Mitchell didn't just walk in, she entered, head high, perfume trailing like an expensive secret. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. She wasn't just there to win. She was there to be seen. "Your Honor," she began, brushing a strand of glossy hair from her face. "I'm here because my neighbor ruined something priceless." The camera of attention followed her hands because Karen spoke with them, pointing, gesturing, waving her glittering rings as though every finger was a statement of superiority. Her target was a quiet, soft-spoken woman named Laura. Laura stood small beside her, clutching a manila folder that looked worn from being handled too many times. She didn't wear designer shoes or diamonds. Just simplicity, pressed blouse, wedding band, steady hands. Karen smirked before the first word of the defense was spoken. "She spilled coffee on my Louis Vuitton," Karen announced, dragging out each syllable like it hurt to recall such tragedy. $3,000. Limited edition. Imported. She emphasized each word as though it were scripture. She said sorry, but sorry doesn't buy me another one. The audience shifted. Someone stifled a laugh. Judy's pen stopped tapping. $3,000? She repeated slowly, almost tasting the disbelief. "For a handbag?" Karen nodded quickly, mistaking curiosity for admiration. "Yes, ma'am. You can't find this one anymore. I keep my things exclusive." "I don't do cheap," Laura spoke softly. "Your Honor, it was an accident. I offered to pay for the cleaning. She refused and said I should know my place." Karen scoffed. "She's lying." Her voice cracked, thin with overconfidence. She was jealous. People like her always are. Judge Judy didn't move. She just stared, eyes narrowing like a hawk watching a slow-moving mouse. "People like her," she repeated, her tone cool as glass. "Explain." Karen shifted, realizing her words had turned into a knife pointed back at her. "I just mean, people who don't understand quality. You know, real class." She gave a forced smile, glancing at her reflection in the courtroom's glossy wood paneling. The irony was already hanging in the air. Thick, visible, impossible to miss. Everyone in the room could feel it. The way Karen's obsession with appearances was beginning to betray her. She wasn't protecting luxury. She was protecting ego. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, a faint smirk ghosting her lips. She had seen this type before, the ones who valued status more than sincerity. They walked into her courtroom thinking it was a stage, forgetting that Judy never plays along. Karen continued to speak, spinning her web with practiced vanity. Your Honor, I work hard for my lifestyle. I manage a business, I pay taxes, I hire people. I've earned everything I own. But she pointed toward Laura, her voice rising. She doesn't respect that. She's always complaining about my parking, my deliveries, my guests. She's been waiting to bring me down. The courtroom's atmosphere thickened. Laura's eyes watered, but her voice remained calm. I've never wanted to bring her down. I just wanted peace. That word, peace, hung in the air like a challenge to Karen's entire existence. For the first time, Judy's pen dropped to the table. Ms. Mitchell, she said, her voice cutting through the air with surgical precision. You said this bag cost you $3,000? Yes. And you have proof of purchase? Karen hesitated, just long enough for the silence to feel loud. Well, not here exactly. I ordered it from a boutique in Beverly Hills. They, shipped directly from Italy. Uh-huh, Judy said, nodding slowly. And you paid with a card? Yes, of course. I don't carry cash. Judy folded her arms, tapping her nails once against her sleeve. Then I'm sure we can get a statement from your bank, can't we? Karen blinked. The mask slipped for half a second. I mean, yes, I could if I wanted to. But Judy had already seen it. That subtle pause, that flicker of panic. Something was wrong with the story. Laura lowered her gaze but couldn't hide a faint, knowing smile. The courtroom audience murmured. Karen's perfect posture faltered. Judy leaned forward slightly, her tone deceptively calm. Ms. Mitchell, before we go any further, let me remind you that lying in my courtroom is not a good fashion choice. The room broke into soft laughter. Karen forced a chuckle, but her hands trembled as she brushed invisible dust off her sleeve. Her act was starting to crack. Inside, you could almost feel the gears turning in Judy's mind. She wasn't ready to confront her yet, not fully. She wanted Karen to talk herself into a corner first. And she was getting close because behind all the labels and glitter, there was a lie. A small one maybe, but lies have a way of unraveling everything around them. And as Judy's sharp gaze followed every nervous twitch, it became clear. This wasn't just about a handbag. It was about who Karen really was when the shine wore off. The courtroom was silent except for the faint rustle of paper as Judy closed her notepad and said, Let's continue. Karen smiled again, but her eyes betrayed her. Something was shifting, and Judge Judy had already decided. The truth was going to walk out of that courtroom dressed in honesty, not designer fabric. By the time Karen finished her exaggerated testimony, the courtroom felt divided between disbelief and restrained laughter. She was no longer defending a handbag. She was defending her pride. Her words came out polished, almost rehearsed, but something about them began to ring hollow. Judge Judy could hear it. That subtle shift in tone, the way confidence starts to crumble when it's not anchored in truth. Ms. Mitchell, Judy began slowly, how long have you owned this bag? Karen blinked, then smiled as if the question was beneath her. About 8 months, Your Honor. I bought it last year during a trip to Beverly Hills. And you're certain it's genuine? Judy pressed, her pen tapping again. Karen straightened her posture, her voice tight. Of course it is. Do I look like someone who buys fake things? Judy raised an eyebrow. You'd be surprised what people look like, Ms. Mitchell. The courtroom chuckled, and for the first time Karen's cheeks flushed. She looked down, fumbling with her bracelet. The same one Judy had noticed earlier. Something about its color, its unnatural shine, seemed off. Judy wasn't about to let that slide. Where did you buy your bracelet? Karen froze for a heartbeat, then said too quickly, It was a gift. Judy smiled slightly. A generous friend? Karen nodded. Yes, very. Do they sell gifts out of parking lot trunks now? Judy said dryly, and the audience erupted in laughter. Karen's eyes widened. Excuse me? Never mind, Judy said, flipping through her notes. Let's return to your claim. You're asking for $3,000, correct? Yes, ma'am, Karen replied, regaining her balance. The cost of the bag and emotional distress. Emotional distress? Judy repeated. Because someone spilled coffee on you? Karen hesitated. Because she embarrassed me. I had an important event after that. People saw the stain. You mean, Judy said, leaning forward. People saw you as human? The room went silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Karen stammered for words that wouldn't come. Judy took the bag from the bench, holding it up for everyone to see. You claim this is an original Louis Vuitton, correct? Karen nodded eagerly. Yes, Your Honor, authentic. Then why, Judy said, turning the bag over slowly. Does the stitching look like it was done by someone blindfolded? The audience gasped. Karen's lips parted, but no sound came out. Judy pointed again. And why is the inside tag misspelled? Louis doesn't spell his own name wrong, Ms. Mitchell. Laughter rippled through the room, but Judy wasn't smiling. Her eyes were fixed on Karen, cold, piercing, unrelenting. Tell me the truth. Is this bag real or fake? Karen's throat worked as she tried to answer. I bought it from a private seller. There it is, Judy said sharply. The first real thing you've said today. The courtroom erupted again, but beneath the noise, the truth was loudest. For the first time, Karen's perfect facade cracked, and Judge Judy had only just begun. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through Karen's pride. Her eyes darted around the courtroom as if searching for an escape, but every gaze met hers with quiet judgment. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, her tone deceptively calm. So, Ms. Mitchell, you're telling me that you spent $3,000 on a designer handbag? From a private seller? Karen forced a smile, her voice trembling. Well, he was reputable, at least that's what I thought. He sold through an exclusive online store. Judy's eyes narrowed. Oh, really? And this exclusive store wouldn't happen to rhyme with eBay, would it? A wave of laughter broke across the courtroom. Karen's face turned crimson. I don't see how that's relevant, Your Honor. Judy raised her hand, silencing the room instantly. It's relevant because truth doesn't need decoration. Ms. Mitchell, only lies do. Her words landed like a gavel strike, final and immovable. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but Judy's expression froze her in place. Let's talk about your so-called damages, Judy continued. You're suing for emotional distress, yes? You say this incident humiliated you in public? Karen nodded quickly, sensing an opening. Exactly. People laughed at me. My reputation, your reputation, Judy interrupted, wasn't ruined by coffee. It was ruined by your attitude. Karen blinked, stunned. Judy's tone sharpened. You walk into my courtroom flaunting imitation jewelry and a fake purse and you expect sympathy? You insult a woman who apologized and offered to pay. You treat her like she's beneath you. Yet you're the one standing here begging for money over a bag that isn't even real. The courtroom gasped. Every word hit like a hammer. Karen's shoulders slumped, the weight of humiliation pressing down. That's not true, she blurted, voice cracking. I didn't know it was fake. Judy's eyes softened, but only for a second. Then maybe the lesson isn't about handbags. Maybe it's about what happens when you chase appearances instead of honesty. Karen stared down at the floor, her breath uneven. For a moment, all the glitter she had worn seemed to dull under the courtroom lights. Her necklace, her rings, her perfect makeup. They no longer looked impressive. They looked heavy, like armor that finally failed. Laura, the quiet neighbor, stood still beside her, eyes full of quiet strength. She hadn't said a word in minutes, but her silence said everything. She didn't need wealth to prove her worth. Judge Judy straightened the papers before her and said flatly, This court doesn't reward arrogance. It rewards truth. The gavel struck once, echoing through the room like a heartbeat that belonged to justice itself. And as Karen stood there trembling, the world saw not a woman in designer clothes, but a reminder that sometimes the most expensive thing a person can lose is their dignity. Judge Judy's tone shifted from questioning to commanding. The time for patience was over. Ms. Mitchell, she said firmly, you've wasted this court's time with a lie dressed in luxury. Karen's mouth opened, but no defense came. Her voice, once sharp and confident, had turned into silence. Judy lifted the fake handbag once more, inspecting it like evidence from a crime scene. You didn't buy this bag in Beverly Hills. You bought it from a counterfeiter and you knew it. Then you tried to use it to humiliate someone who showed you kindness. Karen's lips trembled. I didn't mean— Oh, you meant every word, Judy cut in. But you see, I don't judge people by their clothes. I judge them by their conduct. And yours. She pointed the pen straight at her. Is counterfeit too. The courtroom gasped. The words hit harder than any verdict could. Even the cameras seemed to pause on Karen's face. No more arrogance, no more performance. Only the look of someone who'd been stripped of her illusion. Laura stood quietly, watching the woman who had mocked her shrink before the world. Judy turned to her with a small nod. Case dismissed. Defendant owes nothing, Karen's breath caught. But Judy's gavel came down. Enough. You can't buy dignity, Ms. Mitchell, and you certainly can't fake honesty. The crowd erupted in applause as Karen froze, her reflection staring back from the courtroom table. Expensive, empty, exposed. If you think Judge Judy handled that moment perfectly, type justice in the comments right now. And remember, real class isn't in what you wear, it's in how you treat people. Stay tuned, because what happens next will show you exactly what dignity looks like. The gavel's echo lingered long after the applause faded. Karen stood frozen in place, the weight of her humiliation pressing down heavier than the gold bracelet circling her wrist. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. No comeback, no excuse, no audience willing to believe her. She had walked into that courtroom wrapped in confidence and left draped in silence. Judge Judy had already moved on to her next case, her posture composed, her voice steady as ever. But the lesson she left behind was still thick in the air, visible in the faces of everyone who had watched Karen's fall from superiority. Even the cameraman seemed slower, as if capturing the moment meant preserving a moral truth. Arrogance might glitter, but it never shines for long. Karen gathered her things quietly. The fake bag, once her symbol of pride, now felt like a burden in her hands. She clutched it tightly against her chest as though trying to hide what it had revealed. But there was no hiding anymore. Every eye in the room had already seen who she was beneath the labels, a woman who mistook validation for value. Outside the courtroom doors, the press waited. The moment she stepped into the hallway, flashes of cameras struck her like lightning. "Ms. Mitchell, how do you feel after Judge Judy's verdict?" A reporter called out. Karen flinched. "No comment," she muttered, brushing past, trying to shield her face. The irony was painful. She had spent years fighting to be noticed, and now she wanted nothing more than to disappear. Across the corridor, Laura stood quietly with a small smile of relief. She wasn't celebrating Karen's downfall. She was simply grateful that truth had found its voice. She watched as Karen's heels clicked down the hall, their rhythm uneven, echoing like the last steps of a performance that ended too soon. Laura turned away, clutching her folder, her evidence, her dignity, her peace. As Karen reached the exit, her reflection caught her eye in the courthouse glass door. The woman staring back looked unfamiliar. The flawless makeup couldn't hide the exhaustion. The expensive jewelry no longer gleamed with power, only with irony. She thought about the way Judge Judy had looked at her. Not cruelly, not even angrily, but with that piercing kind of disappointment that only truth can deliver. And deep down, though she would never admit it aloud, Karen knew Judy had been right. The courtroom hadn't exposed her clothes. It had exposed her choices. Every lie, every cruel word, every attempt to prove her worth through something external. It all collapsed under the weight of one undeniable truth. You can't fake character. For a long moment, Karen just stood outside, feeling the wind brush against her face. It was quiet now. No cameras, no applause, no audience. Just her and the sound of her own breathing. She set the fake purse on the nearest bench and stared at it. All that effort to look powerful, all that money spent to impress, and in the end, it had only made her smaller. Inside the courtroom, Judy's next case was already underway, but her earlier words still lingered in the hallways like scripture. You can't buy dignity. Karen closed her eyes and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel superior or admired. She felt human, flawed, humbled, and finally aware that real value doesn't come with a price tag. She turned one last time toward the courtroom doors, as if hoping to catch another glimpse of the woman who had just dismantled her illusion. But Judge Judy was already gone, her robe trailing like a shadow of truth across the bench. Karen whispered softly to herself. She noticed everything, and for the first time she wasn't angry about it. She was grateful. Outside the courthouse, the noise of the city felt distant, almost unreal. The crowd that had once leaned forward to watch Karen's glittering performance now moved on to the next story, the next scandal, the next spectacle. But for Karen Mitchell, the lesson had only just begun. She stood on the courthouse steps, clutching that counterfeit purse like it was her last shield. The clouds above mirrored her expression, heavy, uncertain, ready to break. For years, she had built her world around what people saw: the car, the clothes, the compliments. Every smile she offered was rehearsed, every story she told edited for effect. But today, under the quiet hum of truth, she realized how fragile that world had been. A single question, a single stare from a woman like Judge Judy, had cracked the illusion she spent her entire life maintaining. As she stepped toward her car, a familiar voice stopped her. "Ms. Mitchell," Karen turned. It was Laura, the woman she'd called jealous, the woman she had tried to humiliate in front of millions. Laura held no anger, no gloating smile, just calm composure and the kind of grace Karen had always mistaken for weakness. Karen swallowed hard. "You got what you wanted," she muttered. Laura shook her head gently. "I didn't want to win, Karen. I just wanted you to stop treating people like they're less than you." The words hit harder than Judy's verdict. They were simple, sincere, true. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The traffic below sounded like a faraway ocean, and Karen's mind replayed the scene inside the courtroom. The laughter, the gasp, the final gavel strike that had stripped her of everything fake. Laura gave a polite nod. "Take care of yourself." As she walked away, Karen found herself staring after her, wondering how someone with so little could look so free. She unlocked her car, tossed the purse onto the seat, and caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The makeup she'd spent an hour perfecting had cracked under the heat of humiliation. She didn't look like the woman she wanted the world to see. She looked real, tired, ashamed, but real. For a long time she just sat there. The world outside kept moving, but inside that car, time stopped. She thought about every lie she'd told to protect an image that had never protected her. She thought about Judy's voice. "You can't buy dignity." The sentence echoed like scripture. She didn't hate the words anymore. They made sense now. They were the truth she'd spent her whole life running from. A week passed. The story aired nationwide, trending under headlines that called her the Disingner Karen. Clips of Judy's takedown flooded social media. Millions of views, millions of comments. People laughed. Memes spread, but beneath all the mockery, some saw the deeper meaning. The video wasn't just about a woman exposed for her lies. It was about the quiet power of humility in a world addicted to image. Karen tried to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of her. Late one night, she watched the broadcast alone. When the moment came, the instant Judy pointed out the misspelled tag, she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just nodded to herself, a silent acknowledgement that she had been the author of her own downfall. 2 weeks later, the world had moved on. The headlines disappeared, but something had changed inside her. She stopped wearing the fake jewelry, sold half her closet, and started volunteering at a community thrift shop on weekends. She didn't tell anyone why, she just showed up, sorting through piles of used clothes, mending torn fabric, learning what value really meant when it wasn't attached to a label. Sometimes people recognized her. "Aren't you that woman from Judge Judy?" they'd ask. She would smile softly and reply, "Yes," and I deserved every word she said. And somehow saying it out loud didn't hurt anymore. It healed. Months passed and Karen grew quieter, gentler. The arrogance faded, replaced by something steadier. Humility. She started talking to people she once ignored, listening to stories that didn't come with price tags. Every time she felt tempted to return to her old ways, she remembered Judy's face, calm but sharp, unblinking in truth. Back in Los Angeles, Judge Judy carried on with her docket. But sometimes between cases, she'd recall that day. She'd seen hundreds like Karen before. People who dressed their insecurity in designer fabric. But something about this one stuck. Maybe it was the way Karen's silence at the end had felt. Genuine. Like she'd finally heard herself for the first time. A year later, a small envelope arrived at the network office. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note in elegant cursive. "Dear Judge Judy, you probably won't remember me, but I'll never forget you. I came to your courtroom looking expensive and left realizing I was empty. You taught me that truth costs nothing, but it's worth everything. Thank you for noticing what I tried so hard to hide. A Karen M., no publicity. No cameras. No performance. Just a quiet confession sent in a simple white envelope. The kind of humility that can't be broadcast, only lived." Judge Judy smiled faintly as she read it, her sharp eyes softening for a moment. "Good," she murmured to herself, setting the note aside. Maybe she finally learned. Back at the thrift shop, Karen stood behind the counter, folding donated clothes. A young woman approached, holding up a second-hand purse. "Do you think this looks nice?" she asked. Karen smiled genuinely, the first real smile in a long time. "It's perfect," she said. "Because it's yours. And that's what makes it special." Outside, the afternoon sun spilled through the dusty windows, touching her face with gentle light. No designer shine, no counterfeit glow, just warmth. The kind that can't be bought, only earned. And as she watched people come and go, carrying simple things that meant something real, Karen whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer. She noticed everything. If you believe character is the only brand that never fades, type dignity in the comments. Subscribe for more powerful courtroom stories that remind us, truth doesn't need luxury, it just needs courage.